Uh, I am the only Republican elected to the Stoneham Board of Selectmen. I think if you were to examine my votes, you'd see that I vote with my colleagues, and I always put what's important to the townspeople first. Now, my opponent is the leader of the Democratic caucus. She's a leader in the progressive wing of her party. Why don't we ask her how many times she's crossed over the line and voted with Republicans? She votes lock, step, and barrel with Nancy Pelosi, and she knows it. She's had 64 bills. You want to talk about productivity and working with the other side? 64 bills. 3 of them have moved out of the House. 1 of them is indefinitely postponed, and the other 2 are sitting in committee because that's where Nancy Pelosi wants them. I will not get on a plane like she did last Friday and fly home and tweet about the flight attendant who's going on furlough. I'll roll up my sleeves. I'll walk over to Mitch McConnell. I'll walk over to Nancy Pelosi or whoever the leadership is, and I will work for the people of this district. She flew home last week, left people suffering that needed coronavirus relief hanging in our country because her allegiance to Nancy Pelosi. It's wrong. She has no bipartisan votes to speak of at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Oh, sorry. Yes, you may have 30 seconds.
Thank you so much. I just want to point out that as Democrats, we passed the HEROES Act back in May, and that set up the first comprehensive national plan that the president and the Republican supporters have failed to do for the American people. We have been at the negotiating table, we have offered compromises, and we remain there. It is time for the Republicans to come and be serious and see the pain and challenges the American people are facing.
Thank you. And this, Ms. Colarusso, you may have 30 seconds.
She's in the leadership in the House. She got on a plane and she flew home. There was an offer on the table. Mnuchin made an offer, 1.6 trillion, but they didn't like what was in the offer. They didn't like that people were actually pushing back and holding them accountable and not allowing them to bail out Democrat cities all over the country. So they took their ball and they went home. That was unfair to the American people. That wasn't Donald Trump. That was Nancy Pelosi and Catherine Clark.
Thank you. Moving on. Following the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, we have seen demonstrations across the country. What, if anything, should Congress do? Ms. Colarusso, 2 minutes.
Thank you for the question. Great question. My heart goes out to the family of George Floyd. When I watched that video, I was enraged at what I saw. I was even more enraged that there were 3 officers that watched it happen without intervening. I fully acknowledge that there is racism in our country, but the way to solve it isn't what my opponent is proposing. You read about it in history and you learn the mistakes of our country and you correct them. You don't virtue signal and cause more problems with inflammatory language and continuing to divide people. That's what my opponent does. I'm the only multiracial candidate in this race. And I know what it's like to grow up to being different from people. I don't know the plights of the Black community, but I know what it's like to grow up to be different. The answer from the left is always the same when there's a problem. They never look to solve the root of the problem. They never sit down at the table with the other side. My opponents filed a bill to remove qualified immunity from police officers. That's what she feels is going to solve the racial problem in America. That's only going to make it worse. It takes 2 sides sitting down at the table and coming to a consensus together. No one is talking to the police at all, okay? No one's asking them what needs to be done. But qualified immunity is you're going to see a mass exodus of police officers. And what's going to happen? Our communities are going to all be left vulnerable. And with all the rioting going on, racial tensions are only going to increase.
Thank you. Rep. Clark.
We are at a historic moment in our country. The murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and so many others have forced a long overdue truth-telling about systemic racism in this country. It is not just about police brutality. Racism permeates every part of our culture and society: housing, education, economic opportunity, voting rights, healthcare, and environmental justice. This moment can be a turning point. We must look at our past, and we must do so unblinkingly. If we are going to make real change, we have to talk about those ideals of equality and make them a reality. And that's the work that I've been doing across our faith communities, with communities of color, with Black Lives Matter activists, and with our police. I've had dozens of meetings and conversations with police chiefs and police officers on how we can change this paradigm, how we can increase training, how we can hire more diverse police officers, how we can reimagine policing. And this isn't the first time I've had those conversations. These conversations were ones we had about addressing the opioid crisis, but it is going to take all of us. And that is why I'm proud to have sponsored and passed the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act that takes steps to begin to address how we ensure that everyone in our community is safe, that everyone views police as an important part of protecting our communities and sees that reflected in our police force. So we are going to continue to do this work. This is a time of racial reckoning in our country, and it is work that is going to be founded and grounded in our communities.
Thank you. Ms. Colarusso, you may have 30 seconds.
You heard it. Reimagine. She's going to defund police. That's what their goal is, to defund police. She's been silent on the rioting all over the country. All over the country, she hasn't said a word. And Catherine, if you cared so much about racial equity, you would support school choice and have little children, minority children, Black children have a good shot at a quality education instead of being relegated to poorly performing public schools. If you really cared about young minority Black students and you didn't want them to have a failing education so they could have
Thank you. Your time has expired.
to commit crime and to serve and to go to jail.
We will have more opportunities. Thank you. Rep. Clark, 30 seconds.
These are difficult conversations, but I want every single mom to have that same sense of security that I have when my 3 sons leave our house. I never worry they're going to be harassed or assaulted because of the color of their skin. And the words of a 14-year-old girl at a peaceful protest in Malden ring in my ears. She said, "Teach me my worth." That is what we do when we address structural racism.
Thank you. Next question. Over the past 2 decades, we have had an increasing number of, quote, once in a century disasters like hurricanes and wildfires. What role should Congress play in protecting our citizens? Rep. Clark, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Climate change is the existential threat of our time. It is the #1 national security threat. This isn't a hypothetical problem. Communities across the globe are being devastated by unprecedented extreme weather, like the wildfires we're seeing, heat waves, and record-breaking hurricanes. And it hits very close to home. whether it's the frozen floods in Winthrop and Revere, whether it's the tornadoes that have struck our communities, the ongoing drought, even the impacts on a big bee farm in Natick. All of this is related. And the town manager in Winthrop said to me he could spend every single dollar of his budget on building resilience, and it would not be enough. We have to take action. We know that not only do we have to take action to make sure that we save our planet, that we have clean water and clean air, but also because we have the opportunity to build a new framework that provides resilient, clean economy, environmental justice, and good public health. We can upgrade our grid, we can increase the efficiency of buildings, we can make sure that our fleet is electric and clean, and we can do it with job training. Here in Massachusetts, we are the best in the world at taking ideas out of the laboratory and into the marketplace. We can not only protect our planet, but we can be global leaders in green technology, renewable energy, and setting a pace for creating jobs and creating a better climate.
Thank you. Ms. Colarusso.
I think I opened up by saying my son's out in California tonight. So I really, when I see some of the changes in the climate that are occurring, I am very concerned about them. I do acknowledge that there is climate change, but why it's happening, I think, is open to debate. Congresswoman Clark and AOC sponsored the Green New Deal. Okay, $93 trillion. They got on a plane. They to help the American people, but they're sponsoring the Green New Deal. $93 trillion. Wrap your head around that for a minute. $70,000 burden per family. Guarantees everyone in the country a job. How about that? It's going to overhaul the entire American economy. You want to talk about the airlines? It'll cripple the airline industry. All the airline workers watching tonight, you won't have a job when this happens. We can reduce fossil fuel. The government is in a position to incentivize, not to mandate. The Green New Deal is a national mandate. Let's give businesses tax breaks. Let's give individuals tax breaks. Let's do some positive reinforcement instead of mandating the nation into bankruptcy.
Thank you. Next question. Do you see the need for further federal gun control legislation? If so, what? And if not, why not? And please be specific. Ms. Colarusso.
I am a supporter of the Second Amendment. I believe right now, the way our communities are, and with all the looting and the danger, people are frightened. That's evidenced in the fact that nationwide, more people have applied for gun permits, and even in Massachusetts, especially women. The Constitution is clear that our rights should not be infringed, but I do favor common sense reforms like background checks. But what gun legislation should focus on is it should focus on restricting guns to criminals. A lot of the gun legislation that is proposed infringes on the rights of lawful, law-abiding gun owners. There needs to be mental health checks as well. People that have difficulty should not, own a firearm. But overall, I am a staunch supporter of the Second Amendment. I believe it's fundamental to our country. And with the times that we live in, with the rioting and the defunding of police, like my opponent wants to do, people are afraid and they want to be able to defend themselves. And the Constitution guarantees that.
Thank you. Rep. Clark.
Thank you. Gun violence is a public health issue, and it has shattered way too many lives in this country. And it's not just the mass shootings that capture all of our attention and break our hearts, but it's also the daily gun violence. It's also the loss to suicide with guns. No one should feel unsafe in their home or their school or their place of worship. But the gun lobby and its allies in Congress have shut down every attempt to pass reform. And it was in the aftermath of the terrible shootings at the Pulse nightclub, where we had dozens of young people just out for a night of dance. And for the LGBT community, the dance floor is often the place of refuge where they can find themselves and build community. And what we did in the House was give them 8 seconds of silence. 8 seconds of silence. And we went ahead and we held a sit-in with John Lewis. And we didn't get that legislation passed, but I worked with the families and we took the majority in the House. And one of the first bills we passed was common sense gun solutions. So we closed the gun show loophole and required universal background checks. This is supported by 97% of Americans across political parties and ideologies. And where does that bill sit? Collecting dust on Mitch McConnell's desk. Gun violence is not out of our control. We can do it. Let's increase the dollars for research and let's pass common sense solutions. Joanne, you're muted.
Whoops.
Joanne. We can't hear you. Unmute.
I am unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
A rebuttal to that?
Yes, you may have 30 seconds.
Okay, thank you so much. Catherine, what are we going to tell the people in the communities that are afraid because the police are reimagined or defunded? The efforts that your party and that you're making to remove qualified immunity, do you know how many people are waiting to retire to see what happens with this bill? What should we tell people that are afraid, that don't want to leave their home because they're afraid when rioters come to their community and there's no police to call? How do people defend themselves?
Thank you. Rep. Clark, do you care to respond?
Yes, I would respond by, where have the Republicans been? You just said you supported universal background checks. That bill was passed over a year ago. We're waiting. The American people are waiting to see their pain and to do something, to work together to end gun violence. This is within our control. We can do it, and we are going to do it in the next Congress.
Thank you. Moving on. Several attempts by the House for stimulus payments due to the pandemic have stalled. What do you see as your role in the House in 2021 to address what will be the ongoing struggles for many small businesses and unemployed individuals? Rep. Clark, 2 minutes.
If we do not have healthy people, we are never going to be able to rebuild a healthy economy. 7 months into this COVID pandemic, American families are hurting. We have lost 217,000 Americans. We have an economic crisis that's been brought on not only by this virus, but by the total lack and failure of this president and his Republican supporters to address a strategic plan for this virus. As a result, 1 out of every 5 small businesses has shuttered. Unemployment over the summer, Massachusetts was the highest rate of unemployment in the country. Food insecurity. 1 out of 6 children in our district are going to bed hungry at night. Housing, 60,000 households. People are on the verge of eviction. I am fighting every single day to bring relief. It's why I introduced legislation to have a medical supply chain czar. It is why we passed the HEROES Act 5 years ago, to give the American people that comprehensive plan that they need, that they are not seeing from this president and they are not seeing from our Republican colleagues. In the past 5 months, the situation has only gotten worse. You mentioned that flight attendant. I did talk to her, and she's one of the many millions of Americans and one of the many millions of women who are leaving the workforce, who are facing months of unemployment, who don't know what their future is. This president does not care. If he did, he would stop playing games, he would come to the negotiation table, and he would develop a plan with us to address this virus, crush it, and help us rebuild a more inclusive economy.
Thank you. Ms. Colarusso.
We should not be politicizing this. This should not be about government mandates. This should be about opening the economy. But my opponent, who's running for assistant speaker, she's already the vice chair of the Democratic caucus. When Nancy Pelosi told her to go home on October 2nd, she went home. She can tweet all she wants. She got in a plane, she went home. She didn't roll up her sleeves. She's on a month vacation. They're on a month vacation right now. This is total dysfunction. Congress has completely lost its way, and my opponent is blinded by doing exactly what Nancy Pelosi tells her. Do you know what was in that stimulus bill? Benefits for illegals, money for illegals, money for the cannabis industry, money to bail out Democratic cities, elimination of voter ID. That's the bill you supported. That's what you supported. Where was the money for the people like the guy in Belmont, Jeff Lasseter, who Jamaica Jeffs, who's struggling, 15 high school students, and the 3 restaurants across the street from him who are struggling to stay open? What about those people? Why the cannabis industry? Why Democratic blue cities that are mismanaged? Why not take care of the people in Massachusetts, the people that you said in your opening statement you work for? You have them in the rearview mirror because you want to be the speaker, and that's your goal. And you've forgotten the people of this district, and the people in Melrose know it, and the people on this video know it. If you were committed to the people, you would have stayed in Washington, D.C., and worked towards a compromise bill, whether it was a standalone bill or a compromise bill. That's not what you did. You got on a plane and you came home.
Yes, Rep. Clark, 30 seconds.
I think we do agree there is dysfunction in Washington. There is dysfunction. When we passed the HEROES Act that has comprehensive testing and tracing, support for small businesses and for our schools, the answer from Mitch McConnell, hit pause on the pain of the American people. And those cities you're talking about, those are the communities that make up the 5th district of Massachusetts. You better be willing to go and fight for our schools, for our families, and for our business owners.
Thank you. Ms. Colarusso, you may have 30 seconds.
Since when is Los Angeles in the 5th district? New York, since when did they get into the 5th district? These are blue cities that have been mismanaged for many, many years. They're not in the district. Don't lie to the people. Tell them the truth tonight, Catherine. Come clean. That bill was a bailout bill for mismanaged cities. You can deflect all you want. You can point the finger at President Trump. He stood in Washington, D.C. You went home.
Thank you. We'll take one more round if required. Rep. Clark.
Okay. let's be clear. The HEROES Act contains billions of dollars for the Commonwealth and for the cities within it. If you want to buy into this rhetoric, if you want to side with the president who doesn't care and doesn't see the American people and the people of this district, that's up to you. But what we need are champions who are going to fight, not a president and his supporters who are going to say, it is what it is. Children are hungry. Business owners need our help. I'm going to continue that fight.
Ms. Colarusso, 30 seconds.
While you were on the plane, I was visiting a manufacturing aviation company in Woburn, Massachusetts, that is greatly benefiting from the Trump tax cuts, but they're looking for relief, Catherine. I know you don't get it. I know you're not from Massachusetts, but the people here, they're hardworking people. They pour their lives into their businesses. They employ a lot of folks, and they were counting on Washington, D.C. to deliver. In Washington, D.C., your party, your leader, went home on them and fumbled the ball and left it there.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Moving on. And I will say, most of these questions, we could take a really long time because they're good questions. So this is the nature of the beast here. So next question. If the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, what actions, if any, should Congress take? Ms. Colarusso, 2 minutes.
That issue will be regulated at the state level if that were to occur, because the states will then decide how they want to regulate it. And Massachusetts has already taken steps. But I don't apologize. I'm a pro-life person. We're very proud to be pro-life. I believe every child is a gift from God. I feel for women that are in that situation. I have a lot of compassion. Many of my friends, many of my family members, and I know that this issue can cause a lot of anxiety, the uncertainty of it. But the difference between Catherine Clark and I on this issue, again, there's a substantial difference. Catherine believes that abortion should occur up to 9 months during and after birth. I don't. I think that's an extreme position from the extreme part of her extreme party that she belongs to. What civilized society could condone that? Who could say that was okay? Again, it's going to go back to the states. The states will decide.
Thank you. Rep. Clark.
Again, I believe that reproductive rights are part of human rights and that women should be trusted to make decisions about if and when they are going to have a family, because it is so tied also to their economic lives. And every single time Donald Trump and his supporters try to take regressive action to turn the clock back on women. And that is what we're seeing play out just this very week with the nomination of Judge Barrett. This is another attempt to chip away at healthcare. What is the real rush to get Judge Barrett on the bench? It's because there is an oral argument on November 10th on the ACA. So in the middle of this pandemic, Republicans are rushing while people are voting to put a Supreme Court justice in who will not only take away reproductive rights based on her writings and legal findings, but she will also be on the bench in what they hope will take away the entire ACA. So while we have created millions more people in this pandemic with pre-existing conditions, the focus of Donald Trump and Republicans is on taking away 23 million people's health insurance. This is where we are. This is what is on the table in Congress right now. It is about not recognizing women's autonomy. It is about not seeing the pain of people who fear the medical bills as much as they fear the diagnosis. It is about not recognizing that we don't want to go back to being pre-existing conditions as women. Yet this is exactly what the Republicans are rushing forward with this nomination to make sure that we all have to suffer the loss of health insurance in this country.
Ms. Colarusso, you may have 30 seconds.
Catherine, you want to know who's going to suffer? You want me to tell you? The 9-month-old baby that's dismembered under the extreme late-term abortion that you support. Folks, not me. I won't do it. I want to tell you, most Massachusetts residents agree with me on this issue, not you, Catherine. Your position is extreme. It's an extreme position to take. You want to change the channel and not talk about it, that's fine. It's an extreme position. It's out of line.
Thank you.
Most Massachusetts mainstream voters.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Rep. Clark.
You know, I've heard this argument before from Republicans when they don't want to talk about the fact that reproductive rights are supported overwhelmingly by Americans. So they make up things. They make up gruesome things and then claim, Caroline, you apparently claim that I support dismembering babies that are born live. It's just pathetic. And it is consistent with the untruths and the misinformation coming from this White House and this president's supporters.
Thank you. We are going to move on. We're going to move on.
Catherine, that's not what I said. I didn't say that you support dismemberment of live babies. I said you'd support dismemberment of late-term abortion babies up to 9 months. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Next question. Would you support term limits and/or a mandatory retirement age for federal judges, including the Supreme Court, and federal district and appellate court judges? Rep. Clark, 2 minutes, please.
You know, I think that these are issues that maybe the Senate will have to tackle when we come back into session. But let's look at really what is at stake here. And it goes back to my previous answer. What we saw in Obama's last year in office was Merrick Garland was nominated for the Supreme Court. And we saw Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham all tell us that with only a year to go, we should wait until the election. Let the American people speak. But here we are. We are now in the final weeks of the president's first term in office. Voting has started. Over 3.5 million people have voted. And what are the Republicans doing? After having a super spreader event in the Rose Garden for this nominee, they are now trying to jam through her confirmation. And as I said, what is the rush? The rush is to take away health care from 23 million Americans. Let that sink in. In the middle of this pandemic, Donald Trump and his Republican supporters are taking aim at your health care. They have brought this suit all the way to the Supreme Court. And what does that mean? That means that people with pre-existing conditions are going to have trouble affording and finding health insurance again. That means that maternity benefits for women and the costs of women's premiums are going to go up. That means that your young adult children who are currently struggling to find work in this pandemic are no longer going to be on your health insurance. There has been no plan. There is no alternative except for junk plans that we know do not provide the coverage that American people need at any time, but especially in this pandemic.
Thank you. Ms. Colarusso.
I support term limits and I support non-lifelong appointments on the Supreme Court. A couple things. One, I filed a warrant article. As a select woman, this is how much I believe in term limits, to limit people on the select board to 6 years. I'm in my 6th year. I'm going to announce right now I'm leaving after these next few months because term limits improve the political gene pool. My opponent's a lifelong politician. She moves here, she ran for school committee. She ran for school committee. She ran for state representative shortly after that, ran for state senator, ran for Congress, is a Democratic vice chair of the caucus, and now she's running for assistant speaker. She doesn't understand us common people that go to work every day. She's completely out of touch with the people in the district that open a business, go to their jobs, because she's the epitome of a lifelong politician. And if it's up to her, she's already looking beyond this race. She hasn't even, the ballots aren't even in, and she's running for vice speaker. Talk about an insult. How does that happen? It happens when your mentality, when you're raising your political profile and you're so political, you have so much political ambition that you've forgotten about things like term limits that are healthy and good. And as far as I'm concerned, with Merrick Garland, you have to have the White House. You know about the branches of government. You have to have the White House and you have to have the Senate. He didn't have the Senate. That's the reason why Merrick Garland didn't go forward. Trump has the White House. The American people elected him. You tried to unelect him with impeachment. It failed. He's still president. He's still in office. He has the Senate. The Senate votes. That's the way the founders designed it. That's the way it worked. You know that, Catherine. You know that. So stop saying that the Republicans, it was the Republicans that had the majority.
Your time has expired. Thank you. Moving on. If the Supreme Court declares the Affordable Care Act unconstitutional, what, if anything, would you propose to replace it? Ms. Colarusso.
So we'll have to wait and see what happens. I understand the anxiety that people have around this. Massachusetts had a good plan before the Affordable Care Act, but under the Affordable Care Act, premiums since 2013 have doubled, and it's really unaffordable for a lot of people. My opponent, Catherine Clark, is a supporter of Medicare for all. You got that? All you union workers watching this that have nice health care plans, you won't have them anymore if she gets her way. Medicare for all. Think about that. Government-run health care, after what we just saw with the nursing homes and the mismanagement of the virus, okay? There needs to be health care reform, okay? Any health care reform that comes forward must include coverage for pre-existing conditions. It must have choice and competition, and it must be cost effective. Right now, healthcare is 18% of the GDP. Catherine knows that, 18%. It's 54% of the state budget. People in Massachusetts are paying through the nose for healthcare. They're paying independently through their private plans, and they're paying through taxation as well. And with the end of, with Medicare for all, you know this, Catherine, private healthcare subsidizes Medicare. Medicare prices are lower. People pay higher prices for private healthcare. When you don't have private healthcare, you're going to dismantle Medicare. So it's a foolish idea that you're sponsoring. It'll never work. And if it is overturned, then we'll have to work at some kind of coverage that cobras the people that are affected in the meantime. But Massachusetts has a good system.
Thank you. Rep. Clark.
Thank you. My firm belief is that healthcare is a right and not a privilege. And this pandemic has highlighted the inequities that we knew existed. We know that communities of color have had long, historic, disparate access to healthcare. How is that playing out in my communities of Revere and Malden and Waltham? They have above state average rates of infection and above state average rates of death. This pandemic and virus has just created 7 million more Americans with pre-existing conditions. And let's look at the facts. Donald Trump and those across the aisle who support him support his lawsuit to repeal the ACA. My work has been to expand healthcare coverage for Americans, to make sure that we are protecting people so that when they are faced with a healthcare emergency, they can seek the care that they need. This administration has fought at every single turn to undermine healthcare access, except for those who are already very wealthy. We want to talk about everyday Americans, everyday hardworking people in my district. We are lucky in Massachusetts, we have coverage, but that doesn't cover everybody. And we have fought in Congress at every turn to make sure that our children are covered. This year, President Trump came before the Appropriations Committee with his budget, with cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, decimating the National Institute of Health and the CDC. These are outrageous budget cuts that show us where this president and his supporters' priorities are, and they're not with the health of the American people.
Thank you. Ms. Colarusso, 30 seconds.
You remember, if you like your health plan, you can keep it. Remember that, guys? If you like your doctor, you can keep it. Think about that. You were misled. Catherine is going to keep her Cadillac health plan that Congress gives her. You're going to be on socialized medicine. That's the difference. The elitists will have the excellent health care, those making the laws. The common people, like you and me, we're going to have Medicare for all. She's a sponsor, okay? This is what she wants, folks. This is the choice that's before you at Congress.
Your time has expired. Thank you. Rep. Clark, 30 seconds.
Thank you. I do agree with Caroline on this. The elites are the only one under Donald Trump and the Republicans' visions who will be able to afford health care in this country. In actuality, Congress takes its health care from the ACA and on the Washington, D.C. exchange. And that is exactly what is threatened. Not for Congress, we will be fine, but for everyday Americans who need health insurance coverage. It's a right, not a privilege.
Thank you. Next. What do you consider the most serious foreign policy questions facing the country? Rep. Clark.
The most serious foreign policy facing our country is that of climate change, and how we're going to address it. Are we going to continue to have a president who denies it, who obfuscates, who works against finding global solutions, who is turning his back on the very real challenges, but also the very real opportunities? We have in Massachusetts a unique opportunity to not only find the solutions to climate change, to help us preserve our clean air and our clean water, to preserve a planet to give to our children and our grandchildren and the future. But we are also, under this leadership from this White House, not taking the opportunity to become global leaders in green technology and in renewable energy. We are not using the investments that we can make in science, in partnerships with private industry, to make sure that we are not only addressing climate change, which is an existential threat to our very existence, never mind our economy, but that we are missing this opportunity to create jobs and be global leaders. So what do we have to do? We have set that out, a blueprint in the House as Democrats. We have to do all the things about fixing our electrical grid and increasing in efficiency and using electric cars and fleets. And we have to look at how we continue to really use and strengthen our unions and apprenticeship programs to make sure that we are creating not just jobs, but careers. This is all possible, but we have to address it with the urgency of the problem and the threat before us.
Thank you. Ms. Colarusso.
Question was foreign policy, right? Right? Okay. China. That's where the problem is, in China. My opponent was supported the Iran deal. That's her idea of good foreign policy. It's insane. Donald J. Trump has done a remarkable job on foreign policy, winding down the 18-year war in Afghanistan, standing up to China, controlling Iran, brought justice to Soleimani, killed 600 American soldiers and maimed many, many more. The Middle East is safer. He's entering dialogue with North Korea. We have a strong military. President Donald Trump has done a remarkable job on foreign policy. You signed the Iran deal. You sponsored it. How you could do that, I don't know. That deal put our country at risk, and you were wrong for doing that. And he's doing a really good job, and I congratulate him.
Whoops.
Joanne? I think you're muted.
There we go. All right. Yes, you may have 30 seconds.
Thank you. Donald J. Trump has done nothing but sow divisiveness, be an isolationist, and completely dismantle our State Department. At the very core of foreign policy is diplomacy. Donald Trump doesn't know anything about this. He wants to bluster his way through global politics with his bromances with despots and dictators around the globe. And who gets left behind? The security of the American people.
Thank you. Yes, you may have 30 seconds.
Peace in the Middle East, ending the endless wars. He's doing a remarkable job. He's doing a remarkable job. Thank you.
Thank you. Since the money follows students, do you approve of charter schools? Why or why not? And that is for you, Ms. Colarusso, first.
I added to my campaign message school choice. It is the #1 issue for racial inequality, Catherine. #1, Catherine, because if young minority students get a good education, they have a good future. If they're trapped in failing schools, they're more likely to commit crimes and go to jail and get in trouble. This has been, if I can tell you on the campaign trail, this has been one of the #1 issues. There are so many economically disadvantaged students trapped in poorly performing schools, Blacks, Hispanics like me. Private schools are open right now, and public schools are closed in many communities. We must. School choice has to be a priority. President Donald Trump has it in his second-term agenda. She'll fight him at every step of the way. She's in the pocket of the teachers' unions. Now, my sons went to Stoneham Public Schools. They had the best teachers. I loved their teachers. I had a great relationship. But I'm not in the pocket of the teachers' unions. They're not going to dictate my education policy like they dictate yours. If you really cared about Black and Hispanic and minority students, you would support school choice, but you don't. It's empty words, Catherine.
Thank you. Rep. Clark.
As a mom, a former school committee member, and now as a member of Congress, equity in education is my priority issue. And what have I fought for? The things that I hear we need. As I go through Head Start centers in our communities, our schools, talk to parents, teachers, school committee members, and superintendents, what we need is increased funding so that every child, no matter what their zip code is, no matter how much money is in their parents' account, has an opportunity. We have to make sure that our schools are in good condition, that they have equipment and books, that they have clean air to breathe, which is why I filed a bill with Cory Booker about improving our air quality, even made more important by this pandemic. It's why my focus has been on early education, because we know it's transformative, especially for low-income children and children of color, because we have to understand that if a child is reading at grade level by third grade, that is a game changer. That opens up a world of opportunity. And that is what quality early education that is affordable and accessible for parents can do for a child. I have fought and will continue to fight to extend broadband so we can meet this moment of remote learning, but also that we make sure all our children are connected. And we want our schools reopened, but it is the failure of this administration to make sure that we can reopen them safely, because there's been no plan for testing, tracing, and treatment to ensure that we can do that. So I'm going to continue to hold Betsy DeVos's feet to the fire around her view of school choice, because it is exclusive. She's rewritten the rules so that public dollars that can be going to our public school system are going to private schools with a blank check on discrimination from Secretary DeVos.
Thank you. Ms. Colarusso, you may have 30 seconds.
Catherine, you're a former school committee. You know those decisions are made local. Donald Trump isn't deciding about the Stoneham or Melrose public schools. The school committees decide. They have local authority. She can't answer the question because she despises school choice. She virtue signals about racial equity every time she speaks, but she won't cross over and really demonstrate that she has a commitment to Black and minority students, because she's in the pocket of the teachers' unions. That's where she's at. She knows it.
Thank you.
Everyone knows it.
Time has
Why
expired.
she will never lift the cap on charter schools.
Your time has expired.
Education, and that's why she'll never support school choice.
Rep. Clark.
I do know the difference between local decisions and state decisions in schools. And you should know, as someone who's running for Congress, that Betsy DeVos has a lot of influence because it's federal dollars that help our communities pay for education. So it is important, and I will hold her feet to the fire and continue to do so when she rewrites the rules so that public tax dollars don't go to all of our students, especially our students in need, but go to private schools that she allows to discriminate by race, gender, religion, and LGBTQ status. That's not fair to kids. That is not how we build a great public education system.
So we have time for one more question. So I really do want to take the one more question. And if you can weave in your response.
All right, I'll leave it in my response. I'll leave it in my
You could do that.
Okay.
This will be our last question before we go to closing statements. The House has not passed any immigration reform bills in many years. What can the House do to create a comprehensive immigration plan? Ms. Colarusso.
Okay, so she knows Betsy DeVos doesn't decide what schools are open and closed. She was on the school committee. That's from the last question. To immigration, okay? Immigration reform must be welcoming and it must be humane. It must involve securing our borders, where dangerous drugs and dangerous criminals are coming through. If I am elected, I will commit to working with the other side in passing comprehensive immigration reform that includes a provision for dreamers. My family is all immigrants, okay? My grandfather came here when he was 6 years old from Spain with $6, A Coruña, Spain. My father came here at 18 years old. His mother died when he was 14, looking for work in Massachusetts. He valeted cars at Stella's restaurant on Fleet Street in the North End till he got a job in Blanchard's. When I was small, all the kids used to make fun of my father's accent. Okay, it doesn't bother me, but I know how it made me feel. Okay, I understand those types of things as the only multicultural candidate in this race. There has to be a humane approach. But people like my opponent in Congress advocate for open borders. They've done absolutely nothing on immigration. You know why? Because she can't compromise. Nancy tells her, hold the line, we want open borders. She has to march to those orders. I won't. And I'll disagree with my party leadership, and I'll step forward to get finally comprehensive. And I want you to hear me in Revere, and I want you to hear me in Framingham, okay? I will work towards comprehensive immigration reform that includes a provision for dreamers.
Thank you. Rep. Clark.
Well, I think we have a point of agreement because I believe we need comprehensive immigration reform, and we have to protect those dreamers. I've met with dozens of them in our district. They are excellent students. They are your typical teenager. They are outstanding employees working in all sorts of industries throughout our Commonwealth and our district. They are American in every single way, but on paper. And what has President Trump done? He's pulled the rug out from underneath them. He has done it for the sake of being cruel, for the sake of being racist and leading with hatred and division, somehow holding that out as a way for others to gain an economic foothold. But if this pandemic has taught us nothing, it's taught us that we are in this together. We have to support TPS holders who work in our communities, like Jose in Malden, who started a construction firm, has raised a family. He's an employer and a job maker. He deserves a chance. He deserves comprehensive immigration reform. Instead, President Trump and those who support him have weaponized a war on immigrants and tried to erase our immigrant communities in this current census process, which they have abbreviated and underfunded and tried to scare people out of answering. The House has acted. We passed the Dream and Promise Act. It would put people on a path to citizenship. Mitch McConnell will not bring it up. If he did, it would pass. And that would really call an end to the inhumane immigration policies. I've been to the border. I've talked to the moms who've had nursing infants ripped out of their arms. It is all spelled out for us. That was the plan all along. It is time we move to sane, moral, humane, compassionate immigration reform.
Thank you. We are going to now move to closing statements. First, before we do that, I would like to thank both of you for participating tonight and for putting yourselves out there to run, because as I have run for local office, it is not easy. So thank you both. Democracy works best when it is exercised. So each candidate has 2 minutes for closing, and Ms. Colarusso, you may go first.
Joanne, I want to thank you for a fair debate. I also want to thank Congresswoman Clark for a nice feisty debate. I think the voters can see there's some clear choices here. So this evening you heard the substantial differences between Congresswoman Clark and myself. Two very different directions as to the choice for our communities, our state, and our nation. Make no mistake, that's exactly what's on the ballot, and this is the most important election of our lifetime. I'm reminded when I was a young girl playing boys hockey, I was known to be what's referred to as a net hound. And when it came to crunch time, I'd look up at my coach and say, "Put me in, coach." Plaza, which was my maiden name, he'd say, "Sit down, not yet." As I waited for the latch to open on the bench drawer, I couldn't wait to put my blades on the ice so I could just take off. What a feeling. I was reminded of this when I visited Lake Placid with my kids and stepped into the Herb Brooks Arena, the place where the announcer yelled, Eruzione scored, and the USA beat the Russian hockey team because of the drive and determination of a Winthrop boy named Mike. We all bursted with American pride. Just like those fans, I'm asking you to put your faith in me, not on the ice, but in the halls of Congress. The USA was not supposed to win that game. They were a long shot. They were underdogs, and the Russian hockey team was considered heavily favored. But they overcame against all odds, and they won, and they went on to take the gold. I'm running this race to represent you, and only you. If you're a Democrat, an independent, a Republican, if you're politically homeless, I'm asking you to put me in. Give this Boston girl a fighting chance. The time is now and the time has come. Let's win this race and let's make it once again the shot heard round the world. I'm asking for your vote. Thank you so much. God bless America. God bless you. God bless our country.
Thank you. Rep. Clark.
Thank you, Joanne and the League of Women Voters, and thank you to Caroline for being here tonight. As you can tell from this debate, everything is on the ballot in November. Healing our people, voting rights, women's rights, workers' rights, and Donald Trump and his supporters have turned their back on truth, science, and justice. But we won't. This is our moment to defend our democracy and to defend our neighbors. The last time I got to hear my colleague and my friend, Congressman John Lewis, speak before his passing, he spoke of how heavy his heart was at the soul of America. This was right after the murder of George Floyd. But he also said that he had never been more optimistic about where we could go and the future we could build, as he watched people of all races and walks of life come together and pursue justice. He said that he could feel the winds of change blowing. So we're going to unfurl our sails. We're going to catch that wind. We're going to take the American ideals that we hold so dear of liberty and justice and equality for all, and turn them into reality for all. It is the honor of a lifetime to get to represent you in Congress, and I am so grateful for your partnership. I ask for your vote, and I hope that you and your family remain well and healthy. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you to our candidates once again for participating. Please remember to get your vote by mail application in. Many of you may have already received your ballots, and we know people are already voting. So don't forget to vote. There are many ways to vote this year: by mailing your ballot to your town hall or city hall by election day, dropping your ballot in the ballot box near your city or town hall, or by voting in person during early voting hours or on election day at your polling location. Remember, Election Day is Tuesday, November 3rd. The League would also like to thank our audience at home and the Belmont Media Center for running the Zoom webinar platform for this event. Belmont Media Center and many other cable stations will rebroadcast this event on their cable stations between now and Election Day. The video will also be available at belmontmedia.org. Thank you. I